What's up, Tecumseh, you dynamic joyride of big smiles and good feelings? Welcome to the Tecumseh Bicentennial Podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin J Nichols, but you can call me better than nothing, which is saying something. It's a good day for a good day, and we have a great show planned for you. Today we will hear from Tecumseh Herald publisher and editor Jim Lincoln. Robert Elliott of Clan Elliott will be bringing us a historical tidbit of one Mr. August W. Slayton. We'll also be playing Two Truths and a Lie with Jim Lincoln. Today's T-Town Tale comes from Tecumseh native and my friend Eric Cordy, whose name may or may not translate to one who is skilled in the art and science of yak herding, in a story called Vanilla Illa. And now it is time to be infotained.
Well, journalists are supposed to listen. I took a class in college and they taught us listening and how it's important not to have a conversation that leads to roadblocks in communication. Being an active listener is so important, especially if you're having someone who maybe they went through something traumatic. Maybe you're talking on a subject matter that's uncomfortable or difficult. There's things that you can do that makes the person talking feel more comfortable. The last thing you want to say is something that kind of stops them in their tracks. My name is Jim Lincoln, and I'm publisher, editor of the Tecumseh Herald newspaper. Tecumseh Herald is a community newspaper that comes out once a week, 52 times a year. A lot of communities our size has a newspaper. We have a community of about 8,500 people or so, and we've been covering the news since 1850, one of the oldest newspapers in Michigan. We cover what you would think of in a community, from hard news being your local government, your local schools, your local police and fire news. My favorite part, though, are feature stories about the people who live here. We like to say in the newspaper business that a newspaper should be like a cloth where it's made up of fibers and the threads come together in a newspaper every week, showing that as a community as a whole, we're trying to be representative of that. There's common things that people look for in newspapers, not just your recent news, but they want to know obituaries. It's one thing about a small town is that I think there's a lot of interconnectedness, and I like to think that we work hard to pull everything together each week and as much as we can. Can't hit all the bases all the time, but we do our best.
I asked Jim what led him to a career as a newsman.
I gotta say, I'm incredibly lucky in that I was born into a family that moved to Tecumseh about 4 years before I was born and bought at the newspaper. And so I grew up working with my dad. I don't think I got a paycheck until I was in 7th grade. Yeah, so I grew up watching the paper. Dad would take me down as a kid and let me help out. I would stand on a box and stuff newspapers together. Or the most exciting thing was when the fire siren went off. Back in the 60s, the siren would go off for every, rescue and fire because we didn't have electronic devices to alert volunteers to come into the fire department like we have today. So when the fire sirens went off, which seemed to go off a lot, I was so excited because I got to ride in the car and Dad would make me sit in the car while he'd run into the fire station to see what was going on and where it was. And then off we'd go, and I always got my adrenaline running. And so anyways, yeah, and Mom and Dad both, my mom was a school teacher, said, do what you want to do in life. Yes, you're starting, you got a little job here at the paper. If you want to continue working there, that door is going to be open, but think about it. Think what you want to do. And I was like a freshman in college, and I still didn't know what I was going to do. And then during the summers working here and writing, going to city council meetings, I kind of saw how things worked from a different point of view. The greatest thing about being a journalist is that you almost have like a front row seat to events. If you're the photographer, obviously you're right there. I found a lot of value in that. At that age, I was trying to find what I really did want to do. And I think before I found what I wanted to do, I found where I wanted to live. So the two kind of came together, and doing what I was doing, I realized that this is where I wanted to live.
See, Jim Lincoln presents as exactly a decent man. His love for his work and his love for his community is inspiring. He's one of those people who provides the glue that helps to hold a community together. He's an excellent conversationalist, and talking to him, it didn't give me the sense that he was just waiting for his turn to speak. Instead, I felt like what few things I had to say were actually important to him. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like earth-shatteringly so, we didn't go that deep, but I never felt that his attention wavered and his interest didn't wane. That's a good reporter. So I asked Jim what he finds inspiring.
I think people who are kind, I always find that inspirational. People who go out of their way to be kind. It's kind of humbling. We're living in a sort of chaotic world, and there's a lot of negativity out there and sometimes hate and all that. But I just think that if you think about what inspires you, I think it's the goodness in people, and it leads to respect. It leads to thinking back inward and, do I do the same thing? Am I part of that? Things rub off on people, and it can be good or bad, but things that rub off on me and inspire me are people who are kind. They may be kind through doing good works. It may be simple things, but I think that's an important part of all of us, that it's inspirational.
Inspirational kindness can be found throughout the fabric of our community. I know I have experienced it. Those unearned moments of grace from someone who had every right to treat me harshly for a foolish word or a thoughtless action. These moments of kindness, big and small, they have consistently been present in the warp and woof of Tecumseh. Bob Elliott tells us of just such an example of compassion in the person of Augustus W. Slayton.
Augustus Slayton here actually was in the 18th Michigan, and he actually took a command to lead black troops in the Civil War. He commanded Nashville at one time. He died, I think, in 1899. He had a great business here in town. He owned a lumber store. They called him the Basswood King. They said at the end of the week, the whole freight car would be full, train would be full of lumber from his business. One of the finest businessmen we ever had. When times would get tough and they had to lay his people off, he would still pay them because he didn't want to lose them. For, 1880s, that's pretty big in the day.
That's incredible.
To lead black troops in the Civil War, if he was captured, Confederate President Jefferson Davis, they actually passed a resolution. All white soldiers leading black soldiers would be killed. They would be shot for their actions and considered insurrection. So
Augustus Slayton's obituary reads, quote, "In many ways, A.W. Slayton has been a successful man and has done more for the building and progress of Tecumseh than most men of his time and wealth. For many years, he has kept a large force of men employed, even when hard times came. For months, the employees were paid at a loss to him." Unquote.
I think his obituary was one of the nicest ones I've ever read through the years.
Speaking of historical figures in Tecumseh, who better than a newsman to ask after interesting facts about Tecumseh? I don't know either. I pretty much ask everyone. Jim did not disappoint. Preliminary fun fact, Scoville Stacy is in no way related to the Scoville scale of spiciness used to grade peppers. I know. I checked.
In the beginning years of the Herald, they went through a dozen editors and publishers. But the interesting part is that between 1874 and 1918, the publisher was a county judge, which you don't find that today because that's a conflict of interest. But back then, Scoville Stacy, he had the big mansion on the boulevard, and he ran the paper and did a pretty good job. He's in Clara Waldron's book, and townsfolk spoke highly of him, that he worked very hard at the paper, noting that he would drive all over the area to get people's papers to them and get news and things. So he really did work. And I'm not sure how that works if you're a judge, if you have time to do all that, because I find working on newspapers is pretty time consuming.
Jim's knowledge of history is not limited to the Tecumseh Herald. He also has an appreciation for Tecumseh's history in general.
I think history is entrenched in our local culture, from architecture to, if you've ever been to Memorial Day at the cemetery, what a great event that is, and makes you realize. And just honestly, walking around the cemetery, and I feel like I know like a good number of people there that I guess I'm giving away my age or something, but it is like humbling. Like I said, life kind of like goes too fast. I think the history and the fact that we had the Underground Railroad here is an important, interesting part of Tecumseh's history, and that does kind of dovetail with architecture when we've got homes on the boulevard that have actually secret tunnels and rooms that people were protected until they could take their next step. I tell people that haven't been to Tecumseh or know about Tecumseh those kind of stories. And I was a kid and I had friends that lived in a couple of those houses, and I was always mesmerized by, in the basement, this big wooden door that was solid that you couldn't open. One of the houses on the boulevard actually had a tunnel that went underneath the boulevard to the house across the street. And it just fascinated me that there was a door there. And that particular house, we call it the Beardsley House with the white columns, had like a secret room in the basement. It had a stairway going down where one of the risers in the stairway would slide open so they could pass food and water through to people who they were protecting down there. It was just little stories like that I think were amazing.
Jim seems pretty content. He smiles a lot, he laughs easily. He might not need a superpower, but if he had to pick one,
I would slow time down because life is too short. In the selfish respect, it would help me get the news. I wouldn't have to be running so fast to get these done. But if I could just put everything into, if I could go at my normal pace, but make the world go at a little bit slower pace, then it'd be easier to keep up with. I guess my superpower would be to wave a magic wand and slow things down. Like I said, life's too short. None of us are going to live forever. What's the old saying? You got to slow down to smell the roses. And, that's what I would aim for.
Today's T-Town Tale is a hilarious story that spans 4 decades. It comes from Eric Cordy and is titled Vanilla Illa.
On Evans Street, where it would be right across from the old St. Pete's Church, which is now the Temple Fitness. There's a building right across the street from there that's a chiropractor. When I was a kid, it was an ice cream place. And it was the ice cream place in Tecumseh. The athletic field, there'd be either a baseball game or a softball game. It would go until midnight because they had lights. On one side, it was a softball field, and then there's a baseball field. And as a kid, my grandpa would love to watch just a baseball or softball game. And I had older cousins and things like that who were playing and would go there to get ice cream. And when I was very, very young, I didn't like to go up and order. I wanted to tell my parents or my grandparents, get me whatever. And every time I go by that, I think about this, and I'd have to go up there, and if I wanted an ice cream cone, I had to order it. And my favorite ice cream, I'd get an ice cream cone with vanilla ice cream, soft serve. And I'd go up there and I'd say, I'd like a vanilla Illa. That's how I said it. And I think my parents made me do it because they thought it was really cute. This little 4-year, I'd like a vanilla Illa, please. So to this day, I go by there. Now, let's go 45 years after that. I was driving to Ann Arbor to go to a doctor's visit, and I'd been in the hospital and stuff like that. But I was on the mend, and I had my father's pickup. He had passed away, so I had the pickup. And so I'm going by that same building. I get pulled over by the police. Well, I forgot I had gotten tabs, and I just hadn't put the sticker on. So it was like, and then all of a sudden, now this is my dad's pickup. On the dashboard, he had 3 or 4 different types of air pressure gauges because he was like, you gotta check your tires. And then also, for some reason, I had an old metal saxophone mouthpiece on the dashboard. All of a sudden, right by that same business where I used to say Vanilla Illa, and right across the church that I was going to, and if the pastor would have looked out the door, he would have seen me, pulled over. All of a sudden, the police officer said, "Get out of the truck, please." And I got out, and he said, "Put your hands behind your back." And I went, "Oh." And he put me in cuffs. Now, everybody going to work down Evans Street is seeing me in cuffs. And I go, "Sir, what's the problem?" He goes, "What's it on your dashboard? Is that a crack pipe?" No. It's gauges and a metal mouthpiece. Honest, I play the saxophone. I had to show it. He done, took the handcuffs off, and I'm showing him where 40 years ago I was saying Vanilla Illa. 40 years later, I'm about ready to go to jail.
You're a liar.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
All right, you crazy kids, it's time for that super swell game, 2 truths and a lie. You're given 3 facts, 2 of them are true, 1 of them is lie. Spot the lie, vote online. We'll let you know what the answer is tomorrow.
What is the truth?
You can't handle the truth.
Everybody cheer. It's time to play 2 truths and a lie.
Tell me the truth.
Number 1, the Tecumseh Herald's pressman, John Hoffman, who prints the Tecumseh Herald every week, before he came here, printed the New York Times. Number 2, the Tecumseh Herald has had 2 employees, particular that I'm thinking of, that went on to pretty substantially great things. One became editor of one of the biggest newspapers in the country, and that would be the Miami Herald. And the second person who worked here went on to win a Pulitzer. And we're really proud of that. They did it on their own, but the fact that we worked with these people is just really gratifying and special to us. A lot of times we give tours to kids that come through here, and of course, they only really want to see the press running. We show them all the ins and outs of the business and all, but the press room is the big finale. And they're always asking about the rolls of paper that we put in the press units to run the press. And one of the common questions is, wow, how much do one of those weigh? And I'm like, oh, that weighs 500 pounds.
Well, Tecumseh, which one is the lie? Is it John Hoffman, pressman from the New York Times? Is it the pair of employees who went on to greatness? Or is it that a roll of paper weighs as much as a mid-sized motorcycle? Cast your votes on Spotify or at stgcreative.net/TB podcast. We'll share the answer in the next episode. In the meantime, let's look forward to the future of the newspaper as well as the town itself.
My hope and vision is that the community has a source to go to that brings, like I said earlier, the fibers of the community together. In the future, it may all be online. It may not. I feel the printed copy is a tangible thing, something that is archivable. It's a problem with a lot of sources for news today is that it's not really archivable. And here we are talking about history and the importance of history. And it's been said before that what we print today is tomorrow's history. And so I think it's important we learn from history. And I feel like we're playing an important role here, keeping that going. And I'm not going to be here forever. And my hope for the future for the newspaper is that there's someone here with the same mindset that feels that that's an important component of the community.
So with those things in mind, in 100 years, what would Jim want to say to the people of Tecumseh?
I think that we benefit from being a smaller community. Some would say rural. I think we're far enough from Ann Arbor that we kind of have our own identity and we're not being kind of transitioned to something more like them. At the same time, I think we do serve as a bedroom community for people who are commuting to Ann Arbor, Toledo, and that's great. I mean, we want people here, and I want growth. I think it benefits everybody. It helps our local economy. And I think if Tecumseh is going to prosper, more jobs, we need housing right now for people, and that more people will want to live here. I just hope that they come assimilate, I guess is the right word, into being in a small town life. As I did back in college, I decided this is where I really wanted to be. I hope Tecumseh grows and maintains its independence and character. You know, some things don't change in human relations and living and working with people. I think respect is a key element. I think as Tecumseh grows in the future, it's going to become more diverse, and diversity is a good thing. Think about others, be kind, be humble, and enjoy life, and do what you can to make your community better. Take part in it, because that's really what it's all about.
Well, Tecumseh, thank you for spending another day with me. It is always a pleasure. You are lovely and lovely to be around. Come back tomorrow when we talk with twin sisters Gemma and Alice, owners of the British Tea Garden. Spoiler alert, they're English. Okay.